Hello everybody, welcome to episode 32 of The Mayor and I with me, Lindsay Khan, and Nick Buckley, MBE. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
I'm welcoming you to your own house. We're broadcasting this today on the 6th of August, 2024. And normally we have a little joke, I think, at the beginning of these things. And there's not really much to joke about, is there?
There's not.
It's been the last 2 weeks have been just what can only be described as horrendous, and I'm angry, and I know you're angry, Nick, as well, and I think we're going to talk about that as well. And this has all been precipitated by the stabbing of three young girls, killing of three young girls in Southport.
Yeah.
But I thought, if you don't mind, and I'm gonna take a bit of time here, so I'll be doing a bit of talking. I just wanted to go through July, if that's okay. I'll try and go through it quickly, but I think if you hear this, it kind of gives you a view of what's happened in the last month, and kind of what led to, I think, a kind of almost an escalation as we headed towards what happened in Southport on the 29th of July. So July 4th was the election.
Yeah.
Several Muslim MPs were elected to the House of Commons after a campaign of abuse, harassment and intimidation, displaying zero respect for our political institutions and way of life. July the 11th, new Labour government announced it would release 5,000 prisoners early in September. July 15th, we learned that the Metropolitan Police in London hadn't solved a single petty crime in 3 years across 166 areas of London. July 17th, a Jordanian refugee, Mustafa al-Mabdan, who had assaulted a female police officer in Bournemouth, was spared community service on the grounds he couldn't speak English. I don't know if you heard that one.
Yeah, I did.
July 18th, two asylum seekers who stole a Rolex worth $25,000 were spared jail. July 18th, the same day, mass rioting in Hare Hills community in Leeds after social services took 4 Romani children to social care. So I'm sure the viewers will be aware of these things, but I'm just saying this has all happened
in July,
in a very short space of time. July 18th, same day, rioting broke out in East London Bangladeshi community following political unrest in Bangladesh. Rocks thrown at police officers and cars smashed in mainly Muslim communities. July 23rd, a positive I suppose, Anjem Chowdhury, Britain's most famous Islamist, was sentenced for directing Islamist terror on Britain's streets. July 23rd, a British army officer was stabbed, I think you said hacked, repeatedly outside his home by Anthony Essen, a member of a minority community. I don't know his background, Anthony Essen. Nigerian immigrant. July 26, protests broke out after footage emerged of Greater Manchester Police taking action against Fahir and Ahmad Amas, two Muslim brothers who were later revealed to have severely assaulted the officers before they were assaulted themselves. July 27th, 6 arrests made after a drive-by shooting in the town of Watford. July 29th, reports of a man being stabbed to death, 2 others injured following a knife fight in a park in East London. July 29th in Southport, I can't remember the name of the guy, the Rwandan second generation, broke into a dance class for little girls and stabbed 9 girls, murdered 3 of them, and the one of the adult carers. July 30th, the day after, a mass brawl involving machetes erupted onto the streets of Southend. July 30th, a homeless Kurdish migrant pushed a man onto the tracks of the London Underground station after feeling disrespected. And on July 30th, it was reported that another 3,000 migrants have entered Britain illegally on small boats since Labour took power at the beginning of July. So that's quite a catalogue, don't you think?
And I think most months you could read off 3/4 of that list on most months, and you could have done for several years now. It's horrendous. Crime and disorder in this country is out of control. There is no deterrent. The police force in this country are failing, have been for years. Political interference in the police force is killing them. Mass migration is adding so many more criminals to the criminals we've already got in this country. White people do many of those things as well, white British people. So this isn't just immigrants committing crime, but immigrants are more likely to commit crime. And what annoys most people is most of these immigrants shouldn't be in the country in the first place. We have to put up with third, fourth generation immigrants committing crime, or people born in this country for a century or 1,000 years committing crime because they were born here and they're here. But surely we can differentiate between that and someone like the Kurdish guy who pushes the guy on the tracks of the London Underground. Been in the country, I think, a month or two. What's he doing in the country? What are half these people doing in the country when they've only just got here, and we cannot keep ourselves safe because we've got foreign criminals coming in? We've got to deal with our own criminals and punish them. And what's the Labour government's response to this? We're going to let a load more criminals out to jail because we need the spaces. And the prison problem isn't really the Labour problem, it's a Tory problem. In power for 14 years, haven't built any new prisons. So now we're locking people up and giving them shorter sentences, which does less and less for them as a deterrent. It becomes a revolving door. We put them in for a couple of months, come out again, nothing's changed. And we've known this for decades, but the Tories didn't want to spend any money. And the Tories are woke and pink and fluffy and didn't want to lock anybody up anyway. Hence why we're in this situation. Prison works. It may be expensive. It may not work as in rehabilitation, which doesn't work in 99% of countries across the world. But it takes people off the streets so they can't commit crime while they're in jail. And the general public feel like they're being punished. And if they think they're being punished, they're less likely then to want to be vigilante themselves and take the law into their own hands. But that's what we've got today, isn't it? We've got people taking the law in their own hands because we do not respect and trust and think it's fit for purpose the whole of our criminal justice system. And it's dangerous times ahead.
I think that's a really good summary. There's a lot to talk about, and you mentioned there about the reaction from the government. And I want to come to that in a minute, and I'd be interested in your assessment of the responses from Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper when we get to that. What I think we do know, and I was sending you videos on the 3rd of August, Saturday.
Yeah.
People reacted to what happened in Southport. People were angry. There were people on the streets in Southport showing their anger to the police, basically. And as a result of that, people, and I think these protests were called the Enough is Enough protests. These are people in an unmanaged and an unformed way gathering. Although I would say the previous Saturday there was a march in London of 100 and something thousand people, led by Tommy Robinson. And I can't remember what it was called, that march, but that was a peaceful march.
Yeah.
However, what seemed to happen after that, there were kind of sporadic demonstrations or protests all around the country happening as a result of these 3 young girls being killed. And actually, as I was driving here, I saw, this is a fairly kind of white kind of middle class area here, but I saw a few parents out with their young daughters, and I actually thought, are they thinking as they're now taking their kids out, I've got to be careful? And I think they might be, I think people are actually starting to be scared now for their own children after this incident in Southport. Anyway, there were all these kind of sporadic, spontaneous protests, and I wanted to get involved. You know me, I like to, during COVID I was involved in protests and I want to get out there and show my solidarity. So I went to Manchester on Saturday to join the protest, the Enough is Enough protest, basically. And I kind of was communicating with you during that. And what I noticed was, as I walked up towards the protest in Piccadilly Gardens, I knew it was, I don't know how I found out it was there. You just find out these things, don't you?
Yeah.
I think these things are communicated. Somehow there's a communicate, despite the fact the media and everything is suppressing this stuff. somehow the communication gets through.
Social media.
It's social media. So it's getting through. And I don't know how I found out, but I knew there was a process. I knew it was at 9 o'clock. I couldn't get there till about 1 o'clock. As I walked through the town, the first thing I came across, and I sent you a video, was a pro-Palestinian march.
Yep.
Hamas, anti-Semite comments, all that sort of stuff. They were walking right through the centre down Deansgate, unmolested. The police were escorting them. I wouldn't say the police were marshalling them. They were escorting them. The police were dressed in normal police gear, escorting them. It was clearly organised, clearly allowed to happen, and they were following a path, and the police were leading them. So it was all very, very amicable and I would say friendly with the police. I then walked up into Piccadilly Gardens. There was a small group of protesters left, surrounded by riot police. Surrounded by riot police. They were. You and I need to talk about this later. But I think if you had been there, it would have been great. It would have been with a megaphone. It would have been great, Nick. But you could see they were angry with the people. They were normal people. I walked amongst them. I'm a brown man, as you know. I think at one point one guy said, "Are you for England?" And I said, "Yes, I am for England. England till I die. But I wasn't molested. There was no racism there. There were families there, young children or whatever. There was an incident that kicked off because somebody, and it happened to be a black man, unfortunately, threw a flare into the centre of the crowd, and I think it nearly hit one of the little kids, basically. So the guys reacted to that. But it was just the disparity between what I'd seen on the Palestinian march and what I saw there was completely different. And the guys were frustrated, the men were frustrated, a few of them had a bit to drink away. Of course, it was like any crowd, there was a cross-section. But I really felt a difference between how the Palestinian march was being dealt with and how this protest was being dealt with. There was no chatting between the police and the people there. They were just there with their riot shields, barricades, trying to hem them in all the time. Is it called kettling? I think it's called kettling, isn't it? They were trying to marshal these people into and of course when you're marshaled into a small space, you react, don't you?
Yeah.
Anybody reacts. And the disparity between the two things was horrific. But so I saw all that. But then when I went home, all the news, all the media, mainstream media, the papers, far-right thugs protesting and it just wasn't true, Nick. It just wasn't true.
Anything from the mainstream press isn't true. This comes under the two-tier policing that we've had now for at least a decade. And we see it every single week. The fact groups like Free Palestine, Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, all those people seem to be treated with utmost respect. They can march where they want to march, they can block traffic, they can do what they want. And all that will happen is, can you please move along a little bit, sir, madam? But if it's anything to do with majority white people, working class, poor white people, then they're perceived as the enemy. They're seen as far-right, fascist, Nazi scum. And to be fair, that's exactly what Keir Starmer said on TV. All you scum will be arrested. We don't want you scum on our streets. You scum are not English. You scum are the problem. I had to turn it off. I couldn't listen to it anymore. It's like, you don't get any of this. Now, in any crowd, in any demonstration, there's going to be some scum there. There always is. People will be drinking if it's a non-Muslim crowd. Some people may have views we disagree with. But on those protests, they're nearly, from what I can see, they're nearly all normal white working class people. When it turns violent and the riots, then it changes. Then it isn't just normal white people then. Some of them are criminals. Some of them are people who get caught up in the moment, who are frustrated. So I said this online the other day. In a country, when you don't agree with your leaders and they're doing everything you disagree with, you vote them out of office. That's what you do. But what you do in a country where every government doesn't do what they're told, every political party all says the same things, and when you vote for them because they say they're going to do something, not one of them ever does it. what do you do then?
Correct.
Because we want to engage in a democratic process, the referendum that they spent years trying to overturn. So we do our part, we vote. Not all of us, but we vote, we try to get a government we want. But when they actively then don't implement the policies we voted for, but then do the complete opposite.
Correct. Yeah.
I've been writing an article today that'll go out tomorrow. Tony Blair in his elections was talking about reducing immigration. David Cameron in 2010, when he won his election, talking about reducing immigration. So did Theresa May, so did Boris Johnson, so did Sunak. And a few months ago, so was Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Every single one of our last 5, 6, 7 governments have told us we're going to reduce immigration. And every single one of them has increased it. What are the people to do? I don't condone the violence. I don't support the violence. But I can understand the violence because you're not listening to us and you keep giving us choices. We pick the choice we want and then you do the opposite.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I don't think we are living in a democracy anymore.
It's the illusion of a democracy.
The illusion. We have voted time and time again for promises that have been given to us by these parties, the Tories and now Labour. We've voted time and time again, and they do not do what we vote them to do.
Yeah.
So my view is this democracy is broken because and the numbers make sense, don't they? Reform Party got 4 million votes, Labour only got 9 million, and they're in with that massive majority. This democracy is broken because it doesn't work, because the people are not getting what the 9 million who have voted for Keir, how many million voted for the Tories, they were voting for them to do certain things.
Yeah.
And none of the governments we voted in has done it. And that's why so few people turned out to vote. They've lost their faith in the electoral process, in our democracy, basically.
Absolutely. I don't think it's our democracy itself. I think it's the quality of politicians we have. I think our system works when we have decent people in Parliament, people with morals, people with a desire to serve the public, but we don't. We have career politicians who will say whatever needs to be said to be voted in.
Yeah.
And then I'll do what I want. They're called dictators in other countries.
Yeah.
And we don't need that here. I can't. So this illusion of democracy is, we have this system, every 4 or 5 years you've got a chance to vote. But it doesn't matter what you vote. I'm a magician. Pick a card, any card.
Yeah.
I always guarantee you pick the card I want you to pick. That's our democracy at the moment.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how you vote, you get what we want you to get in the first place.
Yeah, you get exactly what this awful grubby elite want to have. This awful plan they have for flooding this country with immigrants, for destroying, everything we hold dear. It's shocking. I'd like to talk about the reaction by the government now, if you don't mind. So this is from Yvette Cooper. This is why it's so appalling now to see those same police facing violent attacks from thugs, use the word scum, and they might as well use the word scum, on the street who have no respect for a grieving community. That's just a lie. They were on the street for that reason, those people. They were on the street because they were appalled what happened in their community.
And it's got nothing to do with a grieving community, with a grieving country.
Yes.
Just because I live in Manchester doesn't mean I can't relate to those parents of the dead kids in Southport.
Yeah.
Just because I see immigrants with machetes running around what was the place called?
Southend. Yeah.
Doesn't mean I can't relate to that. We're one country. I don't have to live in Southport to be upset.
Correct. As an Englishman, you can have empathy for the people in Southend, in Southport, whatever. You don't, we're
supposed to be one people.
Yeah. This idea that you can't protest or you can't even go to Southport to protest is ridiculous. So it's a total disgrace. Frankly, this is a time when everyone should be showing respect for a community and for the police. Is it?
No.
No, it isn't, is it? But this, I've written these are my notes that I sent to you. This is the voice and the narrative of our oppressors. This is the way they are talking to us. Keir Starmer said he would go out of his way to make sure the Muslim community feels safe.
That's wonderful, but what has he done to make sure everybody else feels safe?
Yeah.
What about the parents of young white girls who were gang raped over 4 decades?
Yeah.
Did he do anything to make them
Yeah,
feel safe?
yeah.
What did he say and Yvette Cooper say about the BLM marches 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Did they criticise the violence there? And 27 police officers injured went to hospital.
Yeah.
Did they say anything about that? I don't think. He took a knee to
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter.
Correct.
Hence why I keep going back to two-tier policing. It's okay to want to crack down on white thugs, and so it should. I don't want police officers being hurt. I don't want mosques being attacked. I don't want shops being looted. But I don't want it being done by any community, by any coloured person of whatever colour, to anybody else. I'm consistent on my law and order. I'm not like them that pick and choose who are the victim community I'm going to support and who are the communities I'm not going to support.
What was your personal sense, Nick, when you heard Keir Starmer talking? Because he's come out twice now to talk, hasn't he, I think, and
Yep.
talk about this. What was the overriding feeling or sense? I know you had to turn the TV off, but what was your thought
The
process?
first time I watched his last one, I turned it off after 20 seconds. I then had to go back a few hours later to listen to it again. I just couldn't listen to it. He was making me angry. He was making me want to go on the streets and smash stuff up. He was making me want to throw bottles at the police. He was making me want to be a violent hooligan and tear down this society because it's not my society. It's not working for me. And at least if we tear it down, we might be able to get something better. But we'll never get better. Tearing things down is easy. Building things up is extremely difficult. We won't get better if we tear this down. What we have to do is fix what we've got. But
what else can we do though now?
Well, now it's all about pressure. It's all about trying to reduce. I mean, the people who are rioting and looting, they're not helping. They're giving the government a gold-plated excuse to crack down on everything and not address the real issues. If all these protests were violent and then we can video the police overreacting, that builds sympathy. That builds a narrative that we're being persecuted in our own country. Then you start getting foreign governments and foreign people talking about it. That embarrasses the government. That's how we change. And then hopefully then we can start voting differently. It's hard to vote for a party supporting what's going on at the moment because the average person is seeing looting and rioting and bricks being thrown at police. I don't want to vote for them people and people who support them. But if those people in Piggly Gardens being smashed in the face by riot shields and there's mums and kids there and they're not doing anything, I'm not having that in my country. I'm voting against this government. We need to be a lot cleverer, but we're not. We're fought. But this always happens. This was guaranteed. So we need to take this in the mix that we're going to get this sort of uncontrolled violence. It's what comes after this violence we need to start planning
Well,
for.
I think the march that Tommy Robinson did was a start. I think that's the way people need to get onto the streets now. Organised marches where we march and we say this is not acceptable. Similar to the thing in the way the Palestinian pro-Palestinians, but English people.
That sounds good, but it changes nothing.
Really?
We had 2 million people marching to not go into the Iraq war. Changed nothing. We had millions of people marching to end the poll tax. Didn't do anything. We've got people marching all over the country for free Palestine. Doesn't do anything. Peaceful marches don't achieve anything because
what do we do then?
Pressure on the government.
How?
All politicians want are votes. That's all they care about. They will do a deal with the devil for votes. We need to make sure politicians understand how they get our votes and how we'll stop other people voting for them as well. That's the only way it works.
I don't think it's enough.
It's enough. It'll just take a decade. Violent revolution doesn't work in this country. Doesn't work in most modern Western countries. Works in Bangladesh. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. I know they've been writing again.
Yeah. Well, the government's fallen. The Prime Minister has resigned and fled the country.
That would be great. Here's my note of my articulation of this after when I was watching this. We have been deserted, abandoned, left to fucking die. And I think that's true. When I saw him then, I thought, this guy is not doesn't care about us. He's abandoned us. He's abandoned us for God knows what.
He was never for us.
Yeah, really.
He was never for us. He's a socialist, communist, identitarian. All he's interested is in power and trying to create the society he thinks is going to be successful. We've been in this position before. In 1939, apart from Churchill, nearly the whole of the cabinet wanted to make a peace deal with Hitler. In 1939, the cabinet was saying, we've lost, we're never going to beat Hitler, we need to surrender and go for terms. He might let us keep ourselves independent, we might have to lose India, and Churchill was the only one going, no, these are dark days, and we may lose, but a country that loses while fighting recovers a lot quicker than a country that loses by capitulating. So let's lose by fighting, and we will, like the phoenix, will come out of the ashes again. But if we surrender and we're beaten because we're cowards, there might not be ever coming out of that situation. So we've been in worse situations before. There was a time where we thought Napoleon was going to invade. We were looking across the channel waiting for him to invade. And luckily he didn't. But Spanish Armada. There's times where we've been in worse situations than this. 1970s, again, let's go back our lifetime. 1970s were worse than this.
No, they weren't.
They were worse than this. They just don't seem as bad now because we're looking back in time.
No, because we didn't have 10 million immigrants over 10 years in the 70s.
Different problems, but we had battles on the streets where the miners, people were being killed. We don't think anything works now, but they haven't completely collapsed yet. We had power cuts, 3 days with no power. Bodies weren't being buried. The country was split in two. 70s were worse than this.
I think this is worse, and I'll talk about that later. I just want to. There's a great article in Spikes by Brendan. I think you know him, don't you, Brendan?
I haven't met him, but
I thought you maybe. It seems that in the eyes of the new elite, some riots are okay, maybe even good, whilst others are vile acts of fascist lunacy. Angry African Americans and their white allies among the Ivy League left getting violent over the killing of a black man. Good. We bow down. Immigrant communities in Leeds setting fires in response to social workers coming for Roma kids. Fine. The language of the unheard. White working class men kicking off in the aftermath of the murder of 3 girls. Evil. Unconscionable. Crushed them. That's what it is, isn't it?
Spot on.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on.
The acceptance, and we'll talk about this later, what's been happening with the Muslim communities after this and what they've been allowed to get away with. We'll talk about that later. But this 2-tier policing, this behaviour towards English people.
Yeah. Let me just follow on from that.
Yeah.
So, white English working class men rioting over the deaths of 3 children stabbed to death by a Rwandan immigrant. He was born in this country, but for me, he was still an immigrant.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't riot over that, when can you? Because we couldn't riot when up to 100,000 white girls were gang raped over 4 decades. We couldn't riot then. We couldn't riot when 22 kids were blown up on my street in the city centre.
Yeah.
We couldn't riot then. We couldn't riot when some lunatics went to London and blew up the underground and buses. We couldn't riot then. How many people have to die before white working class men, who are the backbone of this country, who are the foot soldiers of this country, who basically created the British Empire, and they're the ones who sacrificed their lives for the empire, what has to happen before they go, my trait's kicking in now of being a protector, being a patriot? What has to happen before they're allowed to start protecting their country? Because it's obvious politicians are not doing it. So when does that kick in? When are they allowed to say, I need to start protecting the people I call family? When? And it turns out it was a couple of weeks ago, a week ago. That was when.
And the government and Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, these disgusting people, they haven't got the grace or the intelligence to say, I understand why you guys are feeling like this. I understand why you're on the streets. This is unacceptable, what is happening in the country.
They're not allowed to, because if they admit that not only to themselves, but to the public, that automatically then leads to accusations of all your policies have been wrong for decades. You've been complicit in this. And nobody in a position of power ever wants to admit they're wrong, because they want everyone to think they're amazing and intelligent and they've got all the answers. The second weak people start thinking that other people know that they're the emperor's new clothes, they haven't got all the answers, that's when they lose power. So they've got to double down on this. That's what Keir Starmer's done. He's doubled down. He knows he can't admit the truth. He knows he can't tackle these problems without admitting, yes, mass migration's a problem, integration's a problem, two-tiered policing's a problem. Well, if you start admitting all that, that's the end of Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. They can't admit it, they've got to double down. And doubling down has always worked before. So why wouldn't it work this time?
But I think you're saying there's a problem of ambition here. I think it's far simpler than that. I really don't think he knows what to do. I don't think Keir Starmer knows what to do. I don't think Yvette Cooper. I don't think anybody in the government knows what to do, because, as you've often said, these are career politicians. They don't know about real life, how to face real life and deal with real life. They have their playbook, and I think you've described it before, where, this has happened, therefore this is the process we go through. They're not understanding what's actually happening, and therefore
they don't know real people.
Yes,
They only know middle class white people like them, politicians, the elite who work for the big institutions. They only know these people.
Yeah.
And they'll meet working class poor people every now and again, but they weren't brought up with them.
Yeah.
They don't live on their streets with them. They don't socialise with them. They don't have them phoning them up or selling private messages on social media like I'm getting all the time of normal people telling me their feelings. They don't get any of that.
And that's just got me thinking, because that's a really interesting point, because you and I mean, we present, I think, as middle class or whatever, but I'm not middle class. I think I told you I was born in Hare Hills, raised in Hare Hills. From sort of 0 to 11, I lived in Hare Hills, which was a proper working class community. Well, my dad was a teacher, my mum was a chemist, so they were effective. They were middle class kind of career people, if you like. But I lived in a working class community. I know how working class communities live. Yeah. And then from 11 to 18, I lived in the middle of a council estate. Yeah. My dad's shop was in the middle of a council estate. So all my friends were working class. You're from a working class background as well. So we've grown up in these environments, and I think we do know and understand these people. I'm not just saying I know what working class people are like, because I met one once. I actually, between 0 and 18, I lived in working class communities. You're the same as well. But you're right, these people have never experienced those environments, have they?
They think they have because they've met them.
Yeah.
They speak to focus groups, and they think they understand them. But they really don't.
They don't.
Because
I remember an incident. I would say my wife is middle class. I remember an incident when the kids were young in a park where there were some girls causing trouble, causing trouble, and Anna went over and tried to reason with them, and it just escalated, so I had to go and sort it out. But I sorted it out in the way that I knew from my childhood, and the way well, I won't tell you what I did. I didn't hurt the girls, by the way, but so I sorted it out, and she said, I don't understand, why didn't they? I said, these people don't think that way, Anna. They don't think like you and I think in our middle class world. They think in a very, very different way, and you don't really understand that, I don't think, unless you've lived with working class people in that, or you are a working class people, you've lived with working class people. And these people, none of them have they? No. They've got no idea what's going on in the minds of those people. They've no idea. And I think the reason I went on Saturday to join the protests is because I think the way they do, and I think you think the way they do as well. And you understand why they're so freaking angry with what's going on. But I don't think Starmer and his middle class cronies have any idea
No,
of how people
and
are thinking.
also they're getting confirmation bias all the time.
Yes.
Everyone they're speaking to agrees with them. Everyone they're speaking to goes, hammer those scumbags. Everyone no one is saying to them, Kate, do you understand why they're there? So you might want to, and he should hammer the criminals. Of course he should. I'm for law and order. Hammer the rioters. But do you understand why they're there? Because they're not all rioting. It's only a small percentage of people with the criminality part of it. Do you understand why you see pictures of women with kids there? Do you understand why there's old people there? Let me tell you why they're there. Because if you can get them on board, the criminality then will disappear because they won't have that going on. But it doesn't.
And the ladies at the protest I went to, they were saying, we're here because of those little girls. You know, they had tears in their eyes. They had their children with them. We're here because of those little girls. And those are the people that Starmer are calling scum, far right thugs. You know, women with children who care are actually upset in tears about those little girls that died in Southport. And they're being caught. They get home after that day. Apart from the fact that they're kettled in by people with riot shields and things like that, they get home at the end of the day to turn on the TV and hear their Prime Minister saying they're right-wing thugs.
Yeah. And then seeing another demonstration where the police are singing with them and walking down the street with them.
Yeah.
Why couldn't those police officers treat me like that?
Correct.
Because I'm not bad. Why can't they treat me like that? It's because they all think I'm scum.
Yeah.
And then that alienates them more and more and more. Which then increases the violence, increases the dissatisfaction. Yeah. And we've got months and years of this.
And then that mum with her little kid who's got an older son is going to endorse the older son or her husband getting involved in something more serious, isn't she?
Because it's the male's role to protect society. Yeah. And if he can see that things are happening to his society and he hasn't got the communication skills or the knowledge to do things in a more productive way, then violence comes very easy to young men. Comes very easy.
Yeah. And this, I think Brendan O'Neill summarised it really well. Bereft of solutions to knife crime, too cowardly to confront the rise of radical Islam, clueless in the face of a new culture of nihilism, our rulers focus instead on controlling the public response to such horrors. That's what they're doing. Yeah. They're not actually dealing with the issue. They're trying to control the reaction to it. That's what they're doing. All their energy and effort is going into that, basically. And that's things, and it's also things that almost make me puke, like he announces he's going to spend £30 million on protecting mosques.
Yeah.
You know, our pensioners can't have their winter fuel allowance, but we can find £30 million to protect mosques against right-wing thugs, supposedly right-wing thugs, who don't exist.
No, exactly. And without having a conversation with the Muslim community about why do you think you're being picked on? Why do you think there's a backlash coming towards the Muslim community in this country? And we've not had that conversation, and we never do. So we'll have articles now about how Muslims feel. And we've got demonstrations on the streets, which I'm sure we'll get to, about Muslims protecting their communities, rioting, violence, we'll get all that. But where were the protests from the Muslim community on the gang rape of white girls? Where was the Muslim protests denouncing the 7/7 bombings in London or the Manchester Arena bombings? We probably got an email off a mosque somewhere saying this isn't proper Islam and we condemn that. Well, great, we got an email. There was no demonstrations by the Muslim community side by side with the other communities going, this is evil, this isn't Islam, we condemn. No, they're all quite quiet when it's their community. But God forbid something happens to their community and suddenly it's the worst thing ever. And every minority community in this country does the same. And the reason why they all do it is because we've taught them how to do it. And every time they've done it over the last 40 years, it's benefited them. So it's learnt behaviour.
Oh, no. So what's happening now in the Muslim community? They're the victims of this. So we've gone from a position where three English kids are murdered.
Yeah.
Beautiful little English girls are murdered, to now the Muslim community being victims. They're scared. they're scared, they need protection,
Yeah.
whatever. Now, the reality is, just these numbers, and I sent these to you the other day, but I wasn't really going to cover this. In the last 20 years, do you know how many Muslims have been killed by right-wing thugs in this country?
I'd guess 0.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do you know how many...
And do you know how I know it's 0?
How?
Because if there was any, we would know their names.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like Stephen Lawrence, we would
yeah,
know their names.
Yeah. And Stephen Lawrence, the reality of Stephen Lawrence is that was a horrific crime. That truly was a horrific crime that happened in London to that young man. And that is something that was not to do with racism. It was to do with gang violence in London, basically. And that is something that did get the attention it deserved, in my view. I don't know what your views are on Stephen Lawrence. I think it did get the attention. But you're right. No Muslims have been killed by far-right extremists in this country in the last 20 years. How many English people have been killed by Muslim terrorists in the last 20 years in this country, Nick?
I have no idea, but
100.
100.
100 people, including 22 in Manchester.
Yeah.
So the idea that the Muslim community is terrified, they're scared or whatever, the stats don't even back that up.
No, well, stats never do. It's because we've told them they're victims, because that's how their leaders can control them. That's how politicians can get their votes. We make them afraid, and then we tell them, but I'm here to protect you if you vote for me.
Yeah.
So we've done this to ourselves. Stephen Lawrence's murder damaged the UK more than anything in my lifetime.
Because it led... No, I think you're right. I think his murder was unconscionable and it was a horrific thing.
Well, yeah.
What came from it,
was
I
horrendous.
think you're right.
Yeah.
That's hate crimes, laws, all that sort of...
Yeah. It was... That murder damaged this country more than anything. His mum's a racist. I can't stand his mum.
Right.
His friend he was with at the time was a scumbag, criminal. None of this means he should have been stabbed to death.
Yeah.
But almost every weekend now, almost every day in London, someone like a Stephen Lawrence has been stabbed to death.
Yeah.
We never hear their names.
No.
Why don't we hear their names?
Why?
Because the people doing the stabbing are never white.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they were, we'd know their names.
Yeah.
So we only heard about Stephen Lawrence because the
It was
criminals
white,
were white people. And it was a horrendous crime. But the Muslim community bring a lot of this upon themselves, just like all the minority communities do. They've played this game for far too long because it was beneficial. The Muslim community didn't come out when the 3 girls were stabbed. And the reason why they didn't come out is because they weren't sure if a Muslim did it or not.
Yeah.
When I heard that crime, my automatic reaction was, I bet it's a Muslim.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why wouldn't I think
Even
that?
the Muslims thought it was
Yeah, but why wouldn't I think that? Because nearly all sick, violent crime in this country is committed by a Muslim. So therefore, my experience living in this country the last 20 years has taught me that. It turned out to be a black African, so as far as we know now, Christian at the time.
Well, we've heard very little about this character, haven't we? We've heard very little about
whether
he's been radicalised. Was he a Muslim?
Yeah.
Was he radicalised by Muslims? We don't know.
We don't know.
We're hearing nothing.
Yeah. So the Muslim community brought a lot of this upon themselves by keeping themselves separate, by playing race identity politics, because it was beneficial. But I've been warning for a decade, you've got to be careful about poking the bear. When you're something like 6% of the population, you don't want to annoy 85% of the population. And all minority communities have been doing this for a long time now. And this, what we've got this last week, was always inevitable. But the Muslim community should be doing a lot more, a lot better. They should be standing up, because all of them and their parents and grandparents came to this country for a better life, because their Muslim country was a shithole.
Yeah.
So they should have come here and kept their religion, because that's a private matter, but they've not integrated, and they've then made other people afraid because of their terrorism.
Well, I think when you say they kept their religion, it's a private matter. I think the problem is that Islam isn't a private matter as far as we're concerned, is it? The nature of Islam, the very kind of theology, the ideology behind Islam is not a private matter as far as we as Christians or people without a religion in this country. But we'll come to that later. I just want to finish. I want to talk about the media. I'm trying to keep some structure here because we can easily go off into a rant here, can't we? And I want to keep some structure because there's so much happened, and I want to cover all aspects of it as we go along. I just want to finish with one final quote from Brendan O'Neill and ask your opinion on the very last sentence here. When ethnic minority people riot over the removal of children, it's the understandable cry of the unheard. When white men in tracksuits riot over the murder of children, it's basically fascism. How to explain this strikingly differential treatment of two riots just a fortnight apart, other than as an expression of class hatred? Do you think that's the case?
Absolutely. It was George Orwell who said, Socialists don't love the working class. They just hate the rich.
Mm.
And he said in another one of his books from what I can remember, what is it? I'll get back to them. I can't remember his other quote. But yeah, this is what Labour have become. Labour never used to be like this. In the 70s, Labour stuck up for working class.
Because they were run by working class intellectuals.
Yeah. And there was MPs who were miners.
Yeah.
And they stood on picket lines and worked with factory workers, become a shop steward, promoted and became an MP. There are people who've done proper jobs and lived in council houses. Labour MPs now are all middle class, gone to top universities, never had a proper job, and have been promoted within the workings of the Labour Party, as in, you're one of us. We like what you say, we know you understand what we want, and we're going to promote you. And that's the only way through the Labour Party now to the top. And it's a disgrace, and they're not representing the working people anymore. Hence why we've seen elections. That's why in 2019, Boris Johnson, with all his lies, he was a lying piece of S. But he aimed for and he got all the working class voters in the north of England. Because...
by promising the very things that they're now writing about, or we are now writing about. Yeah.
So all this was predicted, but Labour do not represent the working class anymore. They now represent minority groups and the liberal elite. That's who they represent.
I want to talk about the response from our, and I'm going to say it, our fucking mainstream media. I just despise them. I don't, I don't watch the news anymore. I don't watch BBC, Sky, or whatever. But there have been various clips. I'm not even on Twitter, but I can't help but seeing clips of the mainstream media. Now, these grubby people have immediately latched onto this term far right thugs, and they're using it in virtually every broadcast, every single newspaper article says far right thugs all the way through, and so much so that the people like me have actually started a hashtag calling #far right thugs unite. I don't know if you've seen that. Because we're actually seeing things like, I think there's one clip of a 73-year-old white woman being arrested who's not done anything wrong.
She was trying to leave a kettling area.
And arrested. And the media are not even reporting on these things. No. They're not even reporting on these things. The BBC were interviewing a former detective chief superintendent, and he started to talk about what happened in Hare Hills, and and this is a highly qualified person. There was an Asian or foreign, brown-skinned DIE reporter interviewing him. As soon as he mentioned, so he was giving his view, his opinion. As soon as he mentioned that, we need to look at the Hare Hills riot, she cut him off. That's a completely different thing. You can't conflate that. Cut him off. He was a guy, must be in his 60s or 70s, a highly experienced police chief superintendent. Cut off at the thing. Sky News doing a report in front of an area, I can't remember what area it was. Muslim men came over on motorbikes without a helmet. One's doing a gun at the car. Apparently they went on to slash the tyres. Nobody even talks about it. Another, I think it was on the BBC, another reporter talking as they're talking, coming up behind them, Muslim men with knives and machetes ambling up behind them. Nobody's even referencing any of this stuff. There's been I've only seen 2 comments on the BBC. There was a reporter, Philip Norton, who said there were 2 peaceful protests. I think there were Palestinians, and I think there were enough is enough people. He said it was mostly peaceful until a gang, and he actually said it on the BBC. How the hell he got away with it, I don't know. A gang of 250 Asian youth turned up, started with weapons, and the whole thing kicked off at that point. But these things are not being covered at all by people. And I think finally there's something that happened in Birmingham by a reporter called Fraser Nelson. I don't know who reporting. He said, what is happening on the streets of Britain is causing real tensions among communities. So he's talking about communities again. So this is an example of somebody who is in the middle and experiences what's going on, and they can't actually see what's happening. As a reporter, I've just been chased out of an area of East Birmingham by groups of Asian men who had come out to protect their community against a planned far-right demonstration. The security guard with me decided immediately it wasn't safe. It was clear we weren't welcome, but there wasn't a safe place for us to go for miles. Cars followed us, we had abuse shouted at us, and at one point a group of 6 men ran down the road after us with what looked like a weapon. We were forced to run. Then he finishes. The far right didn't appear to show up, but the community here was on edge waiting. So this is a man who's been subjected to violence from an Asian community, from a Muslim community, and he blames the far right at the end of it.
Because he's completely indoctrinated. He went there looking for the far right, found Muslim criminals, Asian criminals, and it's still the far right's fault. He's spent decades believing this, and he still believes it now.
Even when he experiences the violence from the Muslims himself.
Well, he makes that understandable within himself by saying, well, they're protecting their communities. Evil's supposed to be coming here. You can't blame decent people turning violent if they're fighting evil. And we all know far right is the most evil thing in the world, even though no one can define it anymore. What does far right mean? No one knows what it means anymore.
Yeah,
That means anything we don't like. So he's not blaming those men because he thinks they're semi-heroes for fighting the far right. The whole mass media and mainstream media, I didn't think they could fall any further after COVID. But
boy, they have.
They're on life support now after this.
Boy, they have.
And now the government are talking about they want to clamp down on social media.
Yeah.
Well, of course they do. And I said to someone today on social media, it's correct that Twitter is full of conspiracy theories and misinformation. Of course it is. Just like all the mainstream media are full of all that as well. The only thing different with Twitter is if you look carefully enough, the truth's there somewhere. The truth's
there as well, yeah.
It's just about sorting through who you believe that the truth is there. The truth is never, hardly ever in the mainstream press.
I think you're right, and that's why I've been responding on a few Twitter feeds, and not Twitter feeds but YouTube feeds and stuff, and I've just said to people, just this is like, I think, I've also noticed on YouTube, when Sky News posts reports or whatever, and people are responding. Most of the responses are negative.
Oh, yeah.
That disgusting Emily Maitlis and John Sopel, they were talking about the far right thugs or whatever. So I had to post a comment and I said, these people, what about Hugh Edwards?
Yeah.
These people, I said, go and look for the truth. You're not going to find the truth here. Find the truth elsewhere on Twitter or whatever.
These are people whose colleagues are paedophiles.
Yes.
And they stuck up for them being a paedophile.
Yeah.
And we're going to let those people lecture us on morality.
Oh God, yeah.
And what far right is? Absolutely not.
Yeah. There was one bit of just talking about the mainstream media. What I wanted to ask was, I know you just expressed your opinion, but surely you must have felt angry seeing these reports from the BBC and Sky and everything about the far right when you've been seeing all this.
I'm used to it. It's been going on for a decade or two. Anything that doesn't fit their narrative, they ignore. And they use certain buzzwords like far right, community tensions, community engagement. They use all those sort of phrases and buzzwords to try to explain what's happening. And they're not news reporters anymore now. They really are propaganda, the state propaganda.
They are state propaganda. They're government shills, aren't they?
Yeah. And there's still some decent reporters out there for some of the outlets we've never heard of. But if you're working for Sky, any of the main newspapers, BBC, you're just propagandists. And you might not think you are. You're not consciously doing it. But throughout your career, you have been brainwashed and you have been conditioned. And if you weren't like that, you never would have progressed in your career.
Yeah. If you weren't accepting of that, if you
you want to progress,
weren't willing to be brainwashed and weren't capable of being brainwashed.
Yeah.
Now, one bit of news did get out from so what? No, in none of the papers, apart from GB News, and even I'm not even a fan of GB News, but at least it has some. They are addressing the issue and they're talking about immigration.
They're trying to, but they're being hammered by Ofcom, and
yes,
they're not the station they were 3 years ago.
No, they're not.
But they're having to play this game.
Yeah. But at least they're getting some of the ideas.
They're trying.
However, there was somebody who came out in a position of power and made a statement, and it was a police and crime commissioner, Donna Jones. And I don't know what area she's in, but if you'd have become the mayor, you would have had her job. She said, after the devastating attacks in Southport and sorry, I can't quite read what I've written here, but it's something like following the devastating attacks. Whilst the devastating attacks in Southport on Tuesday were capitalist, the commonality amongst the protest groups appears to be focused on three key areas. So that she's talking about protest groups like the one I went to, basically. So the commonality seems to be focused on three key areas. One, the desire to protect Britain's sovereignty. The need to uphold British values, and in order to do this, stop illegal immigration. The growth of feeling across the country has mirrored, to a lesser extent, the rebellion to illegal immigration that has played out across France in the past 12 months. The government must acknowledge what is causing this civil unrest in order to prevent it, which it hasn't. Arresting people, creating violent disorder units is treating the symptom, not the cause.
Yeah.
The questions these people want answering: what is the government's solution to mass and control immigration? How are the new Labour government going to uphold and build on British values? This is the biggest challenge facing Sir Keir Starmer's government, and it's bitten quickly. Now, that was the voice of common sense in the midst of all this. Guess what happened?
She would have deleted the post and apologised.
It was taken down.
Yeah.
She didn't delete it. It was taken down.
She would have took it down.
Well, she was forced to take it down,
so,
basically.
I'm presuming she was a Tory.
She's a Tory.
Yeah, because she wouldn't have done that if she was Labour. And Tories are just as bad as Labour. They've looked at that and went, that sounds like you're on their side. Get rid of that post for a start. And what she said was quite sensible. She didn't promote violence. She was saying we need to understand the violence if we're going to solve it.
Yeah.
But this is how weak all our politicians are. And when you get a brave one like that, they get shut down and get cancelled.
Yeah.
We had MPs 20 years ago in Parliament trying to raise the issue of mass rape of girls. They got shut down. Some got sacked and not elected again because of it. So every now and again you get a brave politician, but then all the other politicians look at him and go, don't want that happening to me, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
But I think now they must have realised, but I think you're right, because they're so brainwashed by the playbook of this is politics, here's a book on politics. I know you've never had a job, here's a book on politics. They're so brainwashed by politics that they don't understand now. They've got to think differently.
They can't admit it, not only to themselves but to the country, because if they say, yes, you're right, these are the problems, that means I've got to do something about this. I don't want to do anything about this, so I'm going to attack the people on the protests and the rioters because I don't want to solve this problem. If I wanted to solve this problem, I'd been doing it 20 years ago, but I don't want to solve it. I'm happy with mass immigration. I'm happy with identity politics. This is what I believe in, so I don't want to solve it, so I can't admit it's a problem.
Do you think there's a chance the mainstream media will turn? Will start to address the issue, start to become proper journalists?
Eventually, but it'll take several years. Things will have to get a lot worse. and the general public will have to start turning more. Most of the people in the country are still to a large extent believe the mainstream media, even though it's reducing every year. We're not at the tipping point yet, so eventually they will. But we'll also need braver politicians, we'll need reform stepping up, we'll need other people stepping up to give it more credence that what needs to be done. And then if the people start liking that, the mainstream press, not the BBC because they don't need the money, but other ones will start following that because they're looking for subscribers, they're looking for views. That's how they get their advertisement. So they will follow the money. At the moment, the sensible voice is saying, this is a flash in the pan. This is a flash in the pan. Don't take the wrong side because you look foolish in a couple of months' time when they're all locked up and it's the end of it. And history over several decades, over 50 years, has told them all, this is a flash in the pan. All riots end very suddenly.
I can't help feeling, and maybe I like to think I'm in touch with the common man, the man on the Clapham omnibus, for a better word. But I can't help feeling those guys are brave, the ones who are getting involved, chucking bricks, and actually getting and then there's a cliche that comes out of this, and I think you've said it, and I've heard other people say it, which is violence is never the answer. I'm not sure I'm actually, on the basis I'm now questioning everything anybody says to me, and if somebody says something I've heard 1,000 times before, I automatically start to say, is that right now? And one of the things I'm questioning now is violence is not the answer, and I just wonder, well, maybe it is the answer. And how brave are these young guys, the ones who chuck the bricks, who know they're going to get arrested, who have their faces. I mean, when we were in Piccadilly Gardens, there was a freaking drone flying up there that I flicked a V at.
And Piccadilly is full of cameras anyway.
Yeah, but there's a drone hovering right above us, Copper's drone, as we were doing it. And of course, I'm in a position where it doesn't matter. I because I've got my own businesses, I can't get sacked, I can't whatever, and I'm not bothered about going to jail. Oh yeah, so because there was also an incident at one point where this guy was getting beaten up, and Jack, my son, ran in and pulled people off him to stop him getting badly hurt. But then there were two Muslim women who were sort of provoking the crowd, and for some reason they ended up right behind me, so it looked like I was with them. So then the crowd was looking at me, and then that was actually filmed as well. So it's on YouTube as well. So it looks like I'm. But again, facial recognition. Yeah. People will be able to spot me and take my face, whatever. So these people who are going to these things are brave, aren't they?
They are, and the fact they're not masked up means they're not going for violence.
Yes.
Even if violence happens, they didn't go for violence. Otherwise, they'd have been balaclavaed up like a lot of the Muslim youths are because they're going out for violence. I get your point, and I think the best way of explaining that would be, during the First World War, we had young British men like that going over the top in the trenches to be mowed down by machine guns, and they knew they were sacrificing themselves for the better good of the country. In a sort of similar way, those young British men who are throwing rocks and attacking the police are doing something similar. Yeah. They know they're sacrificing themselves for the greater good of the country.
I think they are. I think some of them, not the ones who were looting, taking stuff out of shops and stuff. No. Although there was a guy who took a tray of Greg's pasties, which I thought was quite cool. He's
going to get 10 years.
Is he?
Oh, he's going to get 10 years.
He's only got a tray of pasties.
He's going to get 10 years.
But he's got. I think that's a good thing to steal. If you're going to steal something, steal a tray of pasties. So I don't condone that, but I think the ones who are kind of throwing rocks or whatever, that's a genuine protest. They're angry, and I think you're right. I think they know. I think there's a moment where they know I'm now potentially going to end up in jail, but they're
saying to themselves, and I don't care.
Yeah.
What have I got to live for? I'm watching my country.
Yes. Yeah.
Decline. My baby sister, I'm scared she's going to get raped. My mum's scared to walk the streets.
Yeah.
My dad's been on a low-paid job all his life and can't get a pay rise because there's millions of people wanting to take his job. I can't get housing. I've got a pregnant girlfriend somewhere and we can't get a house because there's no houses, there's no social housing. What have I got to lose? I'm angry. I need to show him I'm angry because I don't feel like a man anymore now.
Yeah.
I feel like a slave. I feel like a puppet. I feel like a coward. And in those moments, that emotion boils over.
And and I think that is bravery. I don't think that's thuggery. I don't think that's far right. I think that is bravery. I think these guys, the ones who are genuinely protesting, and even if it descends into throwing rocks or violence, I think they are British lions. You know, these are this is the stuff, the DNA that won us the First and the Second World War, in my view. So this thing about violence is the answer. I think for them it is the answer, because it's all they have. It's the only thing they've got to show that there's something wrong, to demonstrate there's something wrong, and they want to do something about it. And they are I think there is sacrifice involved there. I really think there is.
Violence. People who say violence is never the answer are completely wrong. Violence.
I'm sure you said it.
I don't think I've actually used those words.
gonna-
Violence is never the answer.
Viewers, could you rewind a few episodes and see what Nick is saying? Yeah.
Violence is the last resort. Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers. I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.